She didn't know the mic was on. And when I found out what they had been recording in there, I knew our marriage was over. There's a particular hum in my studio when the HVAC system kicks in low, steady, like a cello's breath before a note. I've spent my life chasing silence, not as emptiness, but as texture. Silence as color, weight. You can tell when it's changed. It changed in our home. Elise used to hum when she arranged flowers in the dining room. Faint melodies that wandered between jazz and lullabies. These days, I hear the clatter of vases but no melody. Just the occasional chime of her phone, followed by her soft footsteps disappearing down the back hall. She's radiant, still. That never left. But now her warmth feels redirected, as if her laughter is being shared elsewhere, outside my range. It was during a Friday dinner, one of those garden evenings she loves to host. The sky was watercolor lavender, candles flickered in antique sconces, and guests wandered between herb beds and cured meats. Elise glowed under the patio lights, pouring wine and throwing her head back when Gaspard made a joke in French. I didn't catch it. Later, I went inside to find a missing copper tray we used for dessert service. I passed through the narrow service corridor beside the kitchen, and that's when I heard it. Elise's voice, low and affectionate. "Don't forget the secret recipe. That's our little thing." Gaspard replied, with a softness that made my stomach drop. "He has no idea, does he?" They laughed. A quiet, familiar laugh. But not for me. I stood there, my hand resting on the cool brass doorframe. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just disoriented. Like I'd stepped into someone else's house. Someone else's life. I didn't say anything. Not that night. Not the day after. Elise was bright as ever, maybe brighter. But her eyes slid past mine more often. Her phone lived face down on the counter. She left early for gallery meetings. She stayed late for catering consults. And I started noticing what was no longer being said. A few evenings later, I sat with my sister Mira at a small cafe near the river, our usual catch-up. The air smelled like cinnamon and traffic. She sipped her tea and raised an eyebrow before I said a word. "Something's off," I told her. She leaned in. "Is it Elise?" I hesitated. "I'm probably being paranoid. She's been busy, that's all. She's planning something. She always is." Mira was quiet for a beat. "You know, Vic, you hear what most people don't." I shook my head, laughing without humor. "I'm just tired. The studio's quiet. Too quiet, maybe." She reached across, placed a hand over mine. Silence can mean peace. But sometimes it means a door just closed behind you. That night back home, I couldn't sleep. I brewed a cup of coffee, bitter and sharp. Sat alone in the kitchen with just the tick of the wall clock and the echo of her laugh. The one I'd heard in the corridor. Then I remembered I had a portable mic running that night for reverb testing. I retrieved the file from the server, slid on the headphones. No voices, no words, just ambient clatter, glass, footsteps, maybe a plate being set down, and then her laugh. But it didn't sound like her. It was softer, curved inward, almost private. I stared at the waveform on the screen. I knew I hadn't imagined it. And yet, there it was, proof of nothing. Just a laugh I wasn't part of. I haven't told Elise what I heard. Not yet. Maybe I won't. Not until I know what it means. But silence, once a comfort, now has edges. And somewhere inside it, something is waiting. As I reviewed the waveform one last time, I noticed a flicker, a sound anomaly, just before the laugh. I zoomed in. 1 second of static. Then a faint sigh. Not hers. I've always trusted sound over sight. A breath before a lie. A pause between promises. Silence, when something should have been said. So when I placed the discreet microphone behind the spice shelf in the kitchen, the one Elise always says is just for show, it didn't feel like a violation. It felt like calibration, measuring resonance in a room that suddenly felt hollow. Gaspard came again Tuesday, brought fig compote and something smoked in cedar. I stayed in my studio, pretending to test reverbs. In reality, I watched the feed from the corridor recorder, letting the mic run hot. Later, under the sterile glow of my laptop, I filtered out the clatter of pans and wine corks. Then came a voice, Elise's, clearer than last time. "We'll take the leap after the exhibition," she whispered. "Until then, hush. It's more delicious that way." Then Gaspard's voice, lower. You'll be free. He'll understand, eventually. Something metallic dropped in the background, maybe a spoon, or maybe that was inside me. I moved through the house like a stranger. Every surface felt scripted. The moment that truly broke through came the next afternoon, in her gallery's storage wing, where I'd gone to install a new acoustic panel Elise had requested months ago and then seemingly forgotten. One of mine was already there, oddly. She'd removed it from my studio, mounted it behind a rack of framed mirrors. Except it wasn't mounted at all. It was loose. Behind it, taped gently with gold washi tape, I found a folder. Thick, ivory paper. A guest list titled Intimacies of the Palette. I unfolded it slowly. Elise. Gaspard. 20 invited guests. Location. Our patio. Time. Saturday evening. The same evening she told me she'd be at a silent film screening at the museum. There was a subheading on the invitation. A sensory exploration of private flavor. Curated by Elise Marceau and Gaspard Delon. Marceau. Her maiden name. Something in me split. My hands trembled as I lifted the last page. Beneath it, a short handwritten note in Elise's pen. Let's use the studio again. The acoustics made the whipped fennel whisper. I stood there, surrounded by forgotten frames and the dusty smell of wood polish, remembering how she once told a client, Victor built this place with his hands. Every corner listens. And now, it had listened. To them. They'd used my soundproof room, the sanctuary I'd retreated to for decades, to record private ASMR pieces for their patrons. Culinary seductions, whispered recipes, laughs wrapped in low frequencies meant to stir. They took my silence, branded it, sold it. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I sat on a gallery floor, pressing my fingers against the grain of the panel I'd built. My breath felt like sand. What hurt wasn't the secrecy. It was the intimacy, how carefully they'd crafted their performance. In the very space where Elise once kissed me after our first client launch, where we once recorded our laughter, just for fun. That night, back in the studio, I opened the old file cabinet we rarely touched. I pulled out our first joint contract, Elise and Victor Design Acoustics. Her signature curled like music. The last few months rushed back in frames. Her leaning into Gaspard's whispers, her scent shifting from bergamot to something spiced, her absence where her echo used to be. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd rehearsed it, in stereo, at the bottom of the invite list, in faint pencil. This is our story. No need to speak it out loud. I turned the page. The back was blank, except for a small circle drawn in ink. Not a period, a sound wave. It was just past midnight. The wind outside was restless, brushing bare branches against the kitchen windows. Inside, the dim pendant light cast a soft halo over the counter, and the scent of her Cabernet lingered in the air. Clara stood barefoot near the sink, arms folded across her chest. I sat at the table, the envelope resting in front of me. Between us, a silence that felt anything but empty. She finally broke it. Are we really doing this now? Yes, I said. Now. Her eyes dropped to the envelope, then back to me. She didn't reach for it. I saw what you wrote, I said. Ryan. Cafe Orlin. Thursday at 5. She closed her eyes briefly, exhaled through her nose. Lucas. No. No soft entries. No explanations that start with my name. I sat straighter. You took him to Orlin. She looked away. That place mattered to us. You know that. I didn't plan that, she said, voice flat. But you didn't stop it either. Her hand reached for the glass of wine she'd poured earlier, but she only held it. I watched her fingers tighten around the stem. You know how precise I am, I said quietly. I build clean lines. I plan for load bearing. I measure twice. I make things last. She nodded faintly, as if bracing herself. So help me understand, I continued. How do you measure the moment you decided I wasn't enough? She flinched at that. The wine glass touched her lips but didn't tilt. I didn't set out to cheat on you. But you did. I was trying to feel something again, she snapped, then softened. You think I wanted this? To sneak around? To feel like I'm living two lives? No, I said. I think you wanted something I wasn't giving you. And instead of telling me, you rewrote the story without me. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't let them spill. She leaned against the counter, gaze distant. I felt like a ghost in this house, like I was standing in the middle of your sketches, and I couldn't make noise loud enough to be noticed. You never said anything. I did, she said sharply. Not in words you could put on a blueprint. In moments. In silence. In the way I started shrinking around you. The fridge buzzed softly. The house breathed around us. I was always afraid to bring things up, she added, because I knew how you'd look at me, like I'd ruined the perfect symmetry. I stared at the wood grain of the table. And Ryan. Her voice cracked. He listened. He didn't treat me like I needed fixing. He made me feel like a woman again. A beat of stillness. I wasn't cold to you, I said. I just didn't know you were drifting. She walked to the other side of the table, still holding the wine. I should have told you, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to see the hurt, I corrected. There's a difference. We stood there, two outlines of the same marriage. Hers fraying, mine fractured. Then, her phone buzzed on the counter. Once. Then again. The screen lit up. I didn't need a look. She didn't either. The name glowed in the quiet like a flare. Ryan. She turned the phone face down without touching it. Her hand lingered there. I told him I needed space, she said. To figure out what? To figure out if there's anything left between us. I looked at her long and hard. You broke our trust, I said. But I won't break my honor. That stopped her. She sat down slowly, across from me. The wine glass remained in her hand, but untouched. Her voice dropped to a whisper. What are you going to do? I haven't decided. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Relief or dread? I couldn't tell. There's something else, she said, eyes on her glass. Are you going to tell anyone? I stood, taking the envelope with me. Clara watched me, waiting, but I had no answers left to give. The house was too quiet, even for me. After the confrontation, I didn't go back to the main bedroom. I rolled out a futon in my studio and slept beneath the diffusion panels, each one a sculpture of controlled sound. It used to be comfort. Now it was containment. The silence didn't feel like sanctuary anymore. It felt like aftermath, like the breath after an explosion. You're alive, but you don't trust it yet. Elise texted the next morning. Just one sentence. Please, let's not destroy what we built. She didn't say, I'm sorry. Not even I regret it. Just don't destroy. I didn't reply. I made coffee instead. Burn it. The scent clung to the studio, bitter and stale, like words unsaid. 3 days passed. I stayed in the studio, eating leftover risotto from the tasting night. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. Not because I forgave her, but because it tasted like finality. Mira came by on the 4th day, bringing lentil soup and blunt compassion. She sat across from me, elbows on the workbench, scanning the half-tuned monitors and scratched reels. So, what now? Gonna sue her? Expose the chef? I shook my head. No, just trying to figure out what matters. Victor, she said, her voice steady. Ask yourself this, will fighting for the name, the space, the clients, actually heal you? She had a point. The gallery bore both our names. But the work, the soundproofing, the architecture, that was mine. And still, I didn't want it anymore. Not like this. Elise proposed we keep the gallery name, Renner Marceau Design Acoustics, and let the scandal fade. She offered to run it alone. She'd even buy out my half. I laughed. Softly, but it escaped. Not because it was insulting, but because I realized I was no longer angry. I was simply done. That night, I walked barefoot through the depot, touching walls I once reinforced, remembering how we'd sealed this place from the world. For artists, for creators, for us to... It was meant to hold sound like a sacred thing. Instead, it absorbed a betrayal no one would ever hear. By morning, I made my decision. I called a lawyer, signed over the gallery, but under one condition. She couldn't use the Renner name for any of her future ventures. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distinction, a line drawn in clean acoustics. Then I sat with a thick black pen in my hand. It felt heavier than it should, weighted not by ink, but by the part of me it was about to release. I signed. My signature was steadier than expected. Elise didn't fight it, not even a clause. She knew. I left her the gallery, the space, even the velvet curtain we once fought over. What I kept was the studio, the name, and my right to start again. That night, as I wiped dust from the old reel-to-reel recorder, I remembered something Elise once said during a storm. I love how the thunder disappears in this place, like the world pauses for us. But it didn't die. It never had. We just soundproofed the truth long enough not to hear the fracture. I stood at the door of the empty depot, keys in hand, looking at the space where we once planned to hang a sign that read, "Built to hold sound and trust." I turned off the lights, and for the first time in years, the silence felt mine again. But I couldn't help wondering, what do you build when your foundation was false? Some sounds take time to trust again. It had been 4 months since the divorce was finalized. The paperwork was handled quietly, with minimal friction. Elise signed everything with the same looping calm she always used for gallery contracts. No drama, just attachment. I stayed in the depot, but only the back third, the studio and the old conductor's office. The gallery space stood empty now, echoes living where art once did. I let it breathe. Mornings were quiet, ritualistic. I rose early, lit a candle near the entrance, and brewed strong black coffee. Without Elise's preference for lavender toast or lemon water, the kitchen became mine again, utilitarian, sparse, but warm. I began restoring vintage reel recorders in my free time. Not for clients, for myself. Something about the physicality of the gears and the gentle friction of tape between fingers reminded me that not everything sacred must be shared. Then came the voice message from Gaspard. "Victor, I want to speak. Not as an opponent. As a man." I nearly deleted it, but I didn't. I told him to meet me in person outside the local supply store just after closing. It was a crisp, clean evening. The kind Savannah gifts in early spring, air tinted with pine and soot from someone's backyard grill. He wore his usual black, but the arrogance was gone. No apron, just fatigue. I wanted to say sorry. You got a better place to say that. I asked, voice flat. I didn't plan it. I admired her too closely. You know how she glows. I clenched my fists once, let them breathe. "You took my trust," I said quietly, "but not my future." He flinched. Not because I shouted, I didn't, but because I didn't have to. "She's on her own now," he added. "Told me she needed space. That's all she ever really wanted," I replied. "And she found it between our walls." I left him there, beneath the buzzing streetlight. Healing didn't look heroic. It looked like sanding wood at 2 a.m. or layering quiet piano beneath old recordings. It looked like laughter with Mira on her porch while she insulted my stovetop espresso. "You're still overcomplicating everything," she said. "It's coffee, not a broadcast." But the acoustics of the crema, no. In April, I hosted a private acoustic evening, just a dozen guests. Former clients, curious locals, 1 cello, 1 poem, 1 hour of carefully tuned silence. We called it Unheard. Afterward, an older woman in a denim shawl approached me, eyes glassy. "Thank you," she said, "for letting silence be a choice, not a sentence." That stayed with me. A week later, a podcast host, once featured in Elise's circle, made a subtle dig at me, called me the quiet ex-husband, living in the echo chamber he built. I responded with a short video. Just me, framed by the warm grain of the depot's wooden beams. "A home isn't only where we sleep," I said. "It's where our silence means something." It reached more people than I expected, and not one comment mentioned Elise. Still, there were nights I woke to nothing but the faint memory of her voice, the touch of her hand on my shoulder, her presence so familiar that for half a second, I forgot she'd left. And then I'd remember. And exhale. Some wounds don't scab. They recalibrate. I received an envelope last week, no return address. Inside, a photo of us, framed by the gallery arch from our opening night 5 years ago. Her handwriting on the back. "For everything we tried to build." I haven't decided if I'll reply. Maybe some stories don't require a second act. Yesterday, Mira stopped by with a whisper of news. Elise is back in town. Heard she's hosting pop-ups under her maiden name. No gallery. No partner. She paused, wanting to find out more. I looked out the studio window. The wind caught the rosemary bushes just right, sending a breeze through the cracks. "No," I said. "Not yet. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something stir." A year passed like a soft fade-out. Not abrupt, not clean, but inevitable. In spring, Savannah becomes its own music. Breezes catch loose awnings. Street musicians tune their craft between cathedral bells and trolley brakes. It's not silence, but something close, a soundscape with space to breathe. I walked through Forsyth Park that afternoon for a community sound walk organized by Camille, the young designer I'd mentored. She was radiant beneath the oaks, handing out headphones and maps like treasures. Her smile made me proud in a way I hadn't expected to feel again. Near the rose garden, I saw her. Elise. She stood behind a modest stall shaded by a canvas canopy, arranging small spice jars and miniature oil samplers beside folded cards labeled Maison Marceau. Her maiden name, her new brand. She looked different, lighter, not in spirit, in presence. No assistants, no curated lighting. Just her, a wind-worn apron, and glass jars that clinked with each movement. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes, lined, searching, met mine across the crowd. We didn't speak right away. I finished the loop. Listened to a recording of dripping rainwater amplified through copper bowls. The city faded behind me. When I returned, Elise was restocking cinnamon. She looked up. No surprise. No performance. Just a soft nod. Victor. Elise. We stood there like old acquaintances at the edge of something almost sacred. The silence didn't ask for more than we were ready to give. She gestured toward the jars. Local. Simple. Pop-ups only now. The gallery. It wasn't sustainable without the team. There it was, the twist. The end of her grand venture. After Gaspard left, the funding fell through. Her patrons moved on. There had been a rumor of an affair between them falling apart mid-tour, but I hadn't chased it. It's quieter work, she added, but it feels honest. I nodded. I didn't need to say I understood. I did. Then, quietly, almost swallowed by the market's chatter, she said, I'm sorry. I was chasing something I thought I'd lost. Not just with him, with myself. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't offer to start over. And that, strangely, was the kindest thing she could have done. I bought a tin of smoked paprika, left a 10, didn't wait for change. You were right, I said before turning. Silence speaks, even when we don't want to hear it. Her eyes glistened. She didn't follow. That night, I returned to the depot, now just Renner Studio. A place rebuilt, refined. The new recording booth, lined with sound-absorbing cedar, glowed in amber light. Camille had left a thank you note on my desk. So I had a client, a retired cellist whose hands had stopped working, but whose memory still played. I brewed tea, not coffee, not espresso, just chamomile and mint. The scent filled the studio with warmth, not weight. Outside, wind stirred the rosemary. The chime, one I had restored from our first apartment, rang once. Soft, clean. The past broke me, but I rebuilt stronger. Not louder, not grander, just truer. As I sat in the booth, the mic waiting, the sky outside blush violet, horizon wide open. No traffic, no music, just breeze through branches and the gentle hush of knowing exactly where I stood. And this time, the silence wasn't an empty dot. It was mine.